Europe has invested heavily over several decades in developing a framework of rules, procedures, and institutions for conflict prevention and crisis management. In 2014, the rapid downward spiral from political crisis to armed conflict in Ukraine was evidence that the arrangements remain inadequate to the challenge. Russians have been stunned at how quickly the economic impact of the war was being felt. Want to know about it? Well, stay tuned to the video and watch the video till the end. Hello guys, welcome to Futureality. Hit the subscribe button and turn on the notifications to get new updates about technology and development. Hit the like button to show your support, and in today's video, we're going to discuss the war in Ukraine could have global consequences in the future. So without any further ado, let's begin. The ruble hit its lowest level ever against the dollar, which traded at about 84 rubles on Saturday compared to 74 a few weeks ago. That sent prices for imports surging, while sanctions on Russia's largest banks wreaked havoc in the financial markets and new export restrictions promised to scramble supply chains. Global markets don't seem to be worrying at the moment. Part of the reason is that markets tend not to price in extreme tail events, especially when of a military nature, says Paul Donovan, the chief economist of Swiss bank UBS. Russia and Ukraine, once dubbed the breadbasket of Europe, export about a quarter of the world's wheat and half of its sunflower products like seeds and oil. Ukraine also sells a lot of corn globally. Analysts have warned that war could impact the production of grains and even double global wheat prices. In late February 2022, the United States warned that Russia intended to invade Ukraine, citing Russia's growing military presence at the Russia-Ukraine border. Russian President Vladimir Putin then ordered troops to Luhansk and Donetsk, separatist regions in eastern Ukraine partly controlled by Russian-backed separatists, claiming the troops serving a peacekeeping function. The United States responded by imposing sanctions on the Luhansk and Donetsk regions and the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline a few days later. On February 24th, during a United States Security Council meeting to dissuade Russia from attacking Ukraine, Putin announced the beginning of a full-scale land, sea, and air invasion of Ukraine targeting Ukrainian military assets and cities across the country. Oil prices remain above $100 per B as long as conflict rages in Ukraine. The threat of sanctions on Russian hydrocarbon exports and uncertainty surrounding supplies will exacerbate existing market tightness. Some oil traders are also avoiding Russian oil out of concern about U.S. secondary sanctions on financial transactions with Russian entities. Gas prices will rise by at least 50% this year, on top of a five-fold rise last year. Europe has limited gas stockpiles, and there are concerns about gas supplies for the 2022-2023 Northern Hemisphere winter season. Russia is also a major producer of several base metals, aluminum, titanium, palladium, and nickel, all of which will register price jumps. Following spikes in all these markets last year, prices will remain at peak levels as long as the conflict continues. This will have a substantial impact on industrial sectors such as the automotive industry across the globe. The most dangerous scenario for the future of Europe and the global order is one in which the Ukraine conflict sets the stage for a direct military conflict between NATO and Russia. NATO could decide to escalate its involvement in Ukraine by, for example, attempting to implement a no-fly zone or another form of direct intervention. For now, the United States and other NATO allies have rejected implementing a no-fly zone, but that calculus could change if Russia continues to escalate its bombardment of civilians. Russia would be forced to decide whether to back down or directly engage alliance military forces. If it chooses the latter, the risk of an escalating armed conflict between NATO and Russia would increase substantially. US President Joe Biden, who on Thursday announced new sanctions that target Russia's banks and its ability to trade in dollars, has warned that there will be also a price to pay at home, where expensive gasoline is already eroding his support among voters. The pandemic has left the global economy with two key points of vulnerability: high inflation and jittery financial markets. Aftershocks from the invasion could easily worsen both. There's a threat to growth too. Households spending an ever larger chunk of their incomes on fuel and heating will have less cash for other goods and services. Plunging markets would add another drag, hitting wealth and confidence and making it harder for firms to tap funds for investment. Financial markets that once rose and fell in near lockstep are increasingly going their own way, according to MSCI research. A decade ago, markets in different regions moved together about 80% of the time. Today, the correlation is a bit more than 50%, reflecting less of a globalized economy, according to Peter Zangari, MSCI's global head of research and product development. It's closing the door on a chapter that never had a strong intellectual basis, said economist Joseph Stiglitz of Columbia University. It won't be the same. What we're going to see is a process of delinking, disengagement, but it's going to be slow, particularly in the case of China. President Vladimir V. Putin has ushered in a crisis for his country in its economy and identity. The Kremlin is hiding the reality of the country's attack on Ukraine from its own people, even cracking down on news outlets that call it a war. But the economic carnage and societal turmoil wrought by Mr. Putin's invasion are becoming increasingly difficult to obscure. Airlines canceled once ubiquitous flights to Europe, economists warned of more inflation, greater capital flight, and slower growth, and the S&P credit rating agency downgraded Russia to junk status. The real cost of sanctions will be Russia's long-term development, said Yevgeny Nadorshin, chief economist at the PF Capital consulting company in Moscow. Incomes will further stagnate, and the country's middle class will continue shrinking. Many of the country's manufacturers that launched the production of modern trains and cars and other products over the past decade will face serious trouble if the West bans technology exports to Russia, he said. The traditional goal of economic sanctions is first to force policy changes and deter similar actions in the future, with financial punishment only second. For now, allies expect the mere threat of greater pain this time around will be a strong deterrent. The crisis in Ukraine began with protests in the capital city of Kyiv in November 2013 against Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych's decision to reject a deal for greater economic integration with the European Union. After a violent crackdown by state security forces unintentionally drew an even greater number of protesters and escalated the conflict, President Yanukovych fled the country in February 2014. In March 2014, Russian troops took control of Ukraine's Crimean region before formally annexing the peninsula after Crimeans voted to join the Russian Federation in a disputed local referendum. Countries that have very close economic links with Ukraine and Russia are at particular risk of scarcity and supply disruptions and are most affected by the increasing inflows of refugees. Moldova has requested an augmentation and rephasing of its existing IMF-supported program to help meet the cost of the current crisis, and IMF staff are actively discussing options with the Moldovan authorities. The IMF will continue to assess the evolving situation and provide timely policy advice, financial support, and technical assistance to member countries as needed, in close collaboration with international partners. For the life of me, I can't understand why Russia needs a war. I understand that the prices in stores provoke frustration, Mr. Alexeyev wrote, but that's the reality. Russia is a major trading partner for the EU, and many of its members would have second thoughts before triggering what a former Russian prime minister warned would be tantamount to a nuclear option. Another risk is to make Belgium-based SWIFT, an international agreement on a technical tool for global finance, look like a politicized institution where the US rules, inciting other countries such as China to explore alternate tools, Moik says. Donovan from UBS notes that if markets tend historically to discard big tail events, they do react to actual facts. In case of conflict, investors would focus on energy supplies from Russia and food exports from Ukraine, he says. Now that we've come to the end of this video, I want to thank you for sticking with me, and I'd love to know what you think of it. Just comment down below. Also, if you like this video, make sure you like it and stay safe. Today's video is over, but if you want to see more, there's one on your screen right now, and there are a few more fun videos coming soon. I'll see you in the next video.